The Madison Scouts announced that they will allow all genders to join the Corps starting in 2020. It is news that has all of Drum Corps talking. We're going to get the facts behind the decision-making process on this from the CEO of Forward Performing Arts and the Madison Scouts, this time on the DCI News Network and Field Pass. Well, passions are running high in the Drum Corps community this week, and to me, that's good. You know, former marching members, fans, stakeholders, we love this activity, and our passion when something controversial happens is proof of that love. But if we can, for 15, 20 minutes or so, let's set aside the passion and let's talk about some practical matters and get some perspective. And helping us to do that is the CEO of Forward Performing Arts, the CEO of the Madison Scouts, Chris Komnick. Hi, Chris.
Hi there. Thanks for having me on.
Chris, we're speaking a day after the Scouts broke the news that they were becoming inclusive of all genders. So let's start with that phrase. Why inclusive of all genders? Why didn't you just say that you were now going to allow women to join the Madison Scouts?
Well, previous to this point, we actually adopted a policy that accepted transgender males into the organization a few years ago. And this is I wouldn't say it's the next logical step, but it's certainly the next step to basically say we're an all-inclusive organization, that we're not going to discriminate based upon any of those characteristics. And that was obviously pretty monumental for our organization.
Okay, one more thing before we get into the process and the decision-making that went on. Let's talk about the timing of the announcement. This news broke on a Sunday in July. It was the end of a holiday week. It's 3 weeks after the start of the season. I mean, we're in the thick of it. Why make the announcement now? Why not wait until the end of the season?
I think the announcement wasn't purposeful for this date, with the exception that it was a scheduled board meeting for some time. This question had been bantered about for a couple of years, and if not decades, actually. And as the board progressed with analyzing this, we were finally coming to a near conclusion. And the decision to put this up for a vote just happened to fall in this time frame. You can make the debate that there's probably not any best time in our cycle anymore. I would argue that if you announced it before the start of the season, then you might have the chance of distancing people who are marching this year. Or if you announced right after the season, one of our heaviest recruiting times certainly is during the season. So you would certainly want to have that availability opened up. Regardless of timing, you're going to find people either like it or dislike when you would make the announcement. So we just decided that this vote was going to happen, and we're going to push it out there, and it's going to be what it is.
So you say that this has been, I think your word was bandied about for some time now, maybe even decades. Were those just idle discussions decades ago, or has this been seriously broached before?
Well, I can't talk to decades ago because I wasn't involved. I do know those that were involved at that time. So there were certainly some very serious discussions that occurred as far back as the 70s that we're aware. I know even in the 90s and early 2000s that discussion occurred. During my tenure, it had been discussed many times throughout, I'd say, the last 12 years, and took a pretty serious bent, I would say, 2 years ago, at which time we started kind of evaluating a number of different factors, because probably, the number of variables involved in this are pretty significant.
Yeah.
That process took a long time, and it was tough because it meant going out and asking people something they maybe didn't want to be asked about. It includes surveys. And we had been talking with the current membership of the Corps for several years. Part of our postseason interview process with them dealt with this topic specifically. However, I would say, regardless of the thoroughness of looking at all these variables, it really came down to a single point. And for our organization, that single point is, what are the values of the organization? What are we trying to get across in our mission and what we are delivering to the membership, the people that we serve? And was this a characteristic that we felt represented our organization? And that really is the decision point on our side. We had, as an administration, as a board, really felt like this just was not something we wanted to have represent our organization anymore, in terms of having some sort of exclusivity based off of gender. It just didn't really make a lot of sense anymore.
Well, purely as a nonprofit, you've now opened up the clientele that you serve. You've doubled it, in fact, in terms of population. But I'm wondering how much of this was about survival as well. Do you believe, Chris, that the Scouts might have been in danger of folding if you didn't make this move?
Absolutely not. Wasn't even really much of a point of discussion, other than the fact that we talked about, okay, well, if we're trying to capture the best of the best, to have them participate in our programs and our organization, it certainly doesn't make a lot of sense to exclude what is more than 50% of the population. And it is interesting. I mean, this activity has a long history of associating health of the organization with placement, competitive placement. That correlation, I think, probably now more than ever doesn't really exist anymore. Some of the best runs organizations in Drum Corps International may not have always been the highest placing ones. And in fact, actually, some of the best ones are not. And we've certainly seen circumstances where very high placing organizations were not very well run on the back end. So it's nothing to do with the healthy organization. The Madison Scouts and for performing arts are, we're challenged as any nonprofit to continue to find money sources and things along those lines, but we're not in any sort of dire situation whatsoever. That seems to be a common narrative, but it's just not particularly accurate.
Well, that's why I put it out there, and thank you for the explanation. Okay, let's talk about the reaction. It certainly has been thick, and I wanted to focus on the current members first. How did you tell them? When did you tell them? And what was the mood like in the room?
Sure. So early last week, there was a special board meeting to discuss the topic one more time before bringing it to vote. And knowing that this was going to be coming up for vote, and knowing the way our schedule was, with both myself and Dan Peterson already had planned departures from tour after Whitewater on Saturday night, both to attend the board meeting and Sunday morning in Madison. We weren't going to be with the Corps. So we said our best approach for this is to talk with them on Saturday beforehand and let them know that this vote was going to occur, and it could go one way or the other. But if it goes this way, then this is something that you need to expect and prepare yourself for. And so we had that member meeting, and it went very favorably. And I kind of laughed because at that point, because there's some people that were very, all right, this is awesome, and then there were some that were just polishing their horns and were kind of like, all right, sounds good. I mean, it is interesting when you get 150 kids together; they can have very different reactions to things, and so it did kind of run the gamut there. But no, it was responded very favorably. They understood. They had really good questions for us. We knew that there would be a pretty favorable response because we had been surveying them for the last several years. The general opinion of the membership was that this was something that didn't make a lot of sense to them anymore. And in fact, actually, we have a lot of different leadership sessions throughout the course of the year. And I got to tell you, the last couple of years, some of the hardest leadership sessions we had were ones where we were questioned on this very policy, and we didn't have good answers for them. So, out of the membership, there was just certainly identification that this seemed to be incongruous to a lot of the values that we're trying to teach within the Madison Scouts. And they'd be the first to bring it up and say, hey, I don't get this. Why do we do this? If we're teaching these things, then why do we do something else in action? So that had always been really tough and something that we needed to get through. And I think upon hearing this and the changes, the reaction was in a very positive way. Now, of course, they wanted to know, when can we tell people or what have you? And we said, well, we're going to give you notification as soon as we know on Sunday morning, out of respect to let you guys know. We understand, again, it's a show day. That's really where your head needs to be around preparing for that show. But when they woke up that morning, it wasn't too long after that we had the information to provide to them. And it was reported back to us that there was just an overall cheer of elation when it was announced to the membership. So that was a very positive thing. So we were very happy about that.
Do you have any holes in the show right now? And I know you stated this takes effect in 2020, but if a female with the right skill set came forward right now to fill a hole, would you accept her?
We've been asked that. And the only hole we have at the moment, we had a young man on tuba who had gotten injured. I don't think that makes just a lot of sense, just because I think from an overall preparation, in terms of accommodation and things along those lines, it just disrupts kind of operations as we already have in place. So the quick answer is no. That wasn't our intention whatsoever. I think we really just want to focus on recruiting for next year, and we'll have everything that we feel we need in place to make this adoption for next season.
Well, I was going to ask you about it later, but as long as we're there, what has the interest from young women been in your recruiting for next year?
Well, it's interesting. So we're just kicking that off, and I got to tell you, two interesting observations from today have been, number one, the overwhelming number of support directly from financial contributions, which was kind of an unexpected surprise for me. We have received a great number of donations. It'll be interesting to count it all up here when all is said and done, and all of them, kind of attached with the comment of, thank you, much appreciated what you're doing, and things along those lines. And there's been a great outpouring of young women who have reached out and both expressed support and expressed that they have an interest in auditioning. In the next 24 hours, we're going to have our entire audition process turned on for people to begin purchasing the audition packet and get themselves registered. I sense that we're going to see a pretty big surge from that.
Well, all right, let's go to the alumni reaction. The Scouts, of course, have one of the most organized and active alumni bases in our activity, and they have certainly been expressing their opinions about this decision. I know you've been hearing from them directly. Many are upset. They're upset at the loss of a tradition. And, Chris, I've heard this phrase over and over, the loss of a brotherhood. What are you saying to these former members about this decision?
Oftentimes, I will hear a perspective given to me, and they draw kind of like their experience gets locked in time, and that's how they really want to take a look and evaluate the situation. And if we look at the history of this, the Boy Scouts of America was the foundation to why this group existed. And, so by regulation, we took on an all-male characteristic at that point. But the organization was also, from day one, racially integrated. For 1938, that's kind of unheard of in the Midwest. And, they took a pretty strong stance about inclusion of different socioeconomic status within the organization. And that has grown into a number of different people being involved and being included in the organization, with the exception of females. And so there's been great pride that this organization has had around that. And I often talk to people about that very point. I say, what would CHBB do in this situation, who's the founder of the Corps? Because, the people that I've talked to that knew him knew what inclusion meant to him. And why he was so proactive about making sure that kids had an opportunity to participate in this drum and bugle corps. And I think when you kind of frame it in those types of terms, and you really do look at our historic aspect of it, you begin to, or I begin, and a lot of other people begin to kind of take a different perspective on this. The brotherhood doesn't go away. Someone's past experience is not going to change now because of what we do moving forward. We haven't turned this to an all-female organization, so I mean there exists a great opportunity for people to have that brotherhood experience, or to have it same type of experience of achieving a singular goal with a female by your side. So either way, I think that level of experience is still available to members of the Corps.
Before I close this out, are there any messages that you want to get out that I haven't asked you about?
Well, I mean, I could appreciate our alumni are challenged with us. So we knew we would be, and and interestingly enough, there's a lot of alumni that are tremendously supportive. I mean, the amount of text, phone calls, and emails that I've got on the positive side of the equation have been tremendous, and I thank all of them for reaching out and wishing us the best. And interestingly enough, a lot of those are music educators, right, and people that are in this activity in a professional way, and they've reached out and said, hey, this is what you got to do for the growth of this organization moving forward and creating these opportunities for your current membership and your future membership. So I appreciate all of that. But on the, those who are having a challenge with this, I fully understand it. I, in my heart of hearts, believe this is the direction that we need to go to create the best experience that we can for our membership. That means some traditions will have to change or evolve or move into something differently. But the Madison Scouts will be the Madison Scouts. And I think we pride ourselves in terms of our brand as being something that connects with an audience. And we expressed that very clearly when we talked to our membership. We said, our brand of the Madison Scouts is that we can connect and put a show out on the field and get people excited. And in many ways, when we look at the programming side of the equation, we've taken some steps towards that this year. The number might not be where we want it to be right now, but during our show right now, there's at least 3 very clear points where we get most of the fans standing, and that's exciting. And I know the current membership looks at that and goes, wow, okay. And that's like, okay, so now that's part of our Madison Scout experience, and that's part of our Madison Scouts brand. Let's just keep building on that and keep building on that. And we're gonna, really focus on making sure that that's how we define who we are. And we're taking some steps towards that. For me, the next level of tradition is we invite all of those who want to participate in the Madison Scouts and know what that feels like to audition for us for next year, whether they be a young man or a young woman. And I think this will be a fantastic opportunity for them.
Chris Komnick, thank you so much for being so candid with us and for your time. We appreciate it.
Thanks a lot, Dan. I appreciate it.
We have more with the Madison Scouts CEO, Chris Komnick, and his answers to our Box 5 questions in the Field Pass audio podcast, available now on SoundCloud and Apple Podcasts.